If you're looking for a small SUV, there has never been so much choice.
So to help you choose the best small SUV for your life, we've picked 10 of the UK's favourite models so we can examine practicality, interior tech and any hidden features designed to make daily life easier.
Now we're starting with the best-selling small SUV in the UK, and in fact this is the best-selling car in the UK because it's the Ford Puma. And it's little wonder why, because this is a car that comes with amazing engines. You can get an efficient mild hybrid motor, but you can also get a 200 horsepower full-fat ST. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. But first, let's talk about this car's strongest points and its strongest selling points. And those really center around the fact that it offers all of the fun and all of the functionality of the old Fiesta, but with a taller ride height, which is good for families. And no clearer is that than around here at the boot, because the Puma has a special trick up its sleeve, and it's under the boot floor, because in the Puma you get a unique thing for this class, and that is a mega box, which if you pull out the floor here, you will find our friendly furry pal down here. He can demonstrate that this is actually a very useful spot, not just for dogs. I mean, it's a bit small if your friend's going to stay there all journey, but it's great because there's a plug in the floor. So it means if he comes in the car with muddy feet, you can let him hop in there and actually clean off his feet with water and then let the water drain out into the floor underneath. It's genius. Even if you have the floor in place, this is a really good system because it's got two stages. You can either have it lower down here, so you've got a really big boot floor, but even if you raise it into this upper level here, there is still plenty of room, even for a big weekend away suitcase, as demonstrated by our cinch purple one here. Throw that in there, there is tons of space and usability. This is a very family friendly boot. And even in the back seats here, and even with this seat set how I like it, there is a good amount of legroom. We've even got good space for my feet as well. Plus, headroom is surprisingly good. Okay, this is not going to be the most spacious 5-seater car. If someone's in the middle, it's going to be a bit cramped. But for 2 teenagers in the back here, it's going to be a pretty comfortable affair. Although, it is a bit lacking in here when it comes to creature comforts. We've got electric windows, but there's no USB-C port. So if you've got phones to charge, you might have to fight over the ones in the front. Now, when you get into the front, you'll notice that your USB port is very conveniently located down here. But the one that the back passengers will have to use is actually hidden in the storage compartment under the armrest. It is there and it's easy for you lot up here, but for those in the back, they're gonna have to run a wire through there. Although that suggests the ergonomics aren't great, but actually the Puma's ergonomics are among the very best, and that's because it's so simple up here. We've got big buttons and big dials, so controlling things like the climate and also your radio is very simple indeed. Plus you even get a heated windscreen. The technology itself, well, the central screen isn't the most impressive. In fact, it's not impressive at all by 2025 standards, but it is very easy to use. It's got big, chunky buttons, and you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto too, although they are wired, so you'll still have to plug your phone in. Really, the most impressive thing, technologically speaking, up front here is your screen over here. It's a big, wide, and very clear screen, and it shows you all of the information you'll need to get the best out of the car. Functionally as well, we've got good storage space, a couple of cup holders down here, the door bins can swallow cups as well, and the glove box isn't too shabby either.
And of course, if you want to add fun to all that functionality, you can go for the Puma ST model.
Careful Sam, jeez.
Which comes in lukewarm mild hybrid form, as well as hot 200 horsepower form. See if you can guess which one of those I'd choose.
Although, if you didn't think the Puma's interior was to your taste, the next car might just do it. This is the Renault Captur, and unlike the slightly older Ford Puma, it's had a fresh update, which means it has a lovely interior, and it is quite nice, doesn't it? And it's quite nice inside as well. I really like the material they've used on the seats in this car. And also, just generally, it's a nice, simple to use model. I mean, the Captur has buttons where you want them, just like that Puma. And just like that Puma as well, you've got climate control knobs, which are easier to use than if they were in the touch screen. I have to admit, you do slightly compromise when it comes to tech in this car because the screens themselves are actually quite small. They're perfectly fine and they're sharp and they look nice, but this one is smaller and even the infotainment system looks quite dinky on the dash there. Plus, it isn't the fastest to use, so you have to be a bit more patient with it. But then on the flip side, it comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is very handy indeed. You've also got a good amount of storage in here. We've got a couple of cup holders here. The glove box is a bit small, but you've got a nice place to put your phone down there. You've also got 2 USB ports as well as a 12 volt, so you can put an adapter in there as well. And your door bins are nice and chunky. So this is a nice interior. And in the back, well, actually I'm quite surprised about how much knee room there is and foot room as well. I think it's to do with how cut in the backs of the seats ahead are. So it means I've got good space there and good space for my toes as well. And the headroom is okay. But really what sets this car apart from the Puma is the technical bits you get in here. We've got a couple of USB ports, but we've also got a 12 volt port as well. So you can put an adapter in there. So you could have loads of charging space here. So for kids who have devices that need to be powered, this is going to be the backseat place for them to be. And another advantage this Captur has over the Puma is in engines, because you don't just get a hybrid and a petrol, you also get a very fuel efficient diesel as well. But here at the boot is where it falls behind, because you'll notice while it does swallow our weekend getaway suitcase quite easily, if I remove it, you'll spot that the underfloor space is nowhere near as good as the Puma's. It is good in the sense that we've got some wide space here and it's relatively deep, but it doesn't have that amazing space at the bottom. So there's no hosing down of dogs and there's just not as much room overall. Now I've shown you a sporty car and I've shown you a more premium car, but what if you want both? Well, this is the Volkswagen T-Roc and it comes in sporty R-line trim. And that means you get some racy external features, including big alloy wheels, some silver finishes, including on the roof racks, and you even get a cheeky roof spoiler. And that sportiness actually carries into the interior when you look at these seats. You've got lovely R-line chairs in this car, which are actually nice and comfortable, and they're quite wide as well, so they'll fit most body shapes. But elsewhere, it just feels like a more premium version of the interior you got in the Ford Puma, and that's a very good thing because it means you've still got tactile buttons and easy to use switches on the go. Climate control is very easy to use with these twisty knobs down there, but everything feels a step above. And that includes actually the digital technology, because the screens in this car are really sharp and it's very easy to use the systems. You do still have to plug your phone in this particular T-Roc to get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto working. But overall, this is an easy interior to live with. And that's also true if you store things like bottles in your doors or in your cup holders down there, and you even get a bit of storage under the armrest as well. And just like the Golf, the T-Roc can also be had in both petrol and diesel forms, but this is where it goes off-piste from the Golf, because in the back, you'll notice that this taller car has a lot more headroom. In fact, we've got this much space above me here. That's quite good, that. And also you've got a good amount of knee and leg room to go with it. So my feet fit comfortably there and my knees have a good amount of room. Plus, as a rear bench, actually this is quite a wide car, so if you were to squeeze 3 kids and 3 teenagers maybe in the back, I think they'd be all right. But really it's a more comfortable 4-seater. But the good thing is, versus some of the other cars here, you've got a 12 volt port down there, and while it's not a USB port, it means you can at least put an adapter in to keep your phones charged up. And you even get a central armrest as well, which comes with a pair of cup holders, and additionally you get a ski hatch there, which of course you can put skis through, but most of us are just going to use it to reach the wine gums in the boot. Although of course if you're carrying more than just sweets in your boot, it is handy to know that the T-Roc is pretty spacious. In fact, while it isn't the biggest boot up here, and we'll talk about it in a second, what it does do is have a very impressive underfloor storage area. Now this particular car has a spare wheel in there, so there's no carpet on it. But even with that there's tons of space above it. So you could easily hide away items or even lower the boot floor to make it more spacious. And I can demonstrate with our suitcase that this boot has no issue swallowing our case in this direction, although if I were to turn it this way around, it is a little bit of a squeeze. You can tell that this car is based on the Golf. So if your boot space in this direction is priority, there is a car that's even better for the job. And it's the Volvo XC40. And it comes with the most engine options of all of the cars we have here today, because you can get a petrol, you can get a diesel, you can get a plug-in hybrid, and you can also get a fully electric version. But it doesn't matter which one you go for, really, they all come with this smart Volvo exterior and a very mature interior. In fact, of all the cars we have here today, this might be the most sophisticated one, barring one car, which we'll show you in a little bit. But as far as this XC40 cabin goes, it's a very nice one actually, and it's got some interesting features, including carpet that goes all the way up the side of the door card here. It reminds me of those nightclubs that have carpets up the walls. And you've also got interesting amounts of storage space. We've got loads actually, loads of space down there, really big space in here. You've got obviously a glove box, which is okay. Door bins are generous. And then you've got these weird nifty bits here. I don't know what you'd put in there. It's kind of like an ashtray, but I don't think you'd have that these days. And then this unit here, easily, you can access it in there, or you can actually just remove it entirely if you want. Good for wine gums, I think. Tech-wise, it's not the best car here, but it is pretty good. I mean, the system, Volvo system, is nice and easy to use. They've got big blocks on the screen. It's very intuitive. It does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but you do need to plug your phone in to use it. The screen ahead of us here is nice and wide. It's sharp, it's clear, super easy to use. And you do have a few buttons, some for your volume, for example, in your media, and same goes on the steering wheel, but your climate control is in the system. It's not the most hard one to use, and I have to admit actually it's quite quick to make changes, but it's not the best one for on the move changes if you want to be quick. Overall though, this is a nice cabin, and there's some nice materials as well, and the seats, they're wide and very supportive. Now, I said this was a mature car, but I actually think it's also very good for mature people, because the amount of space you have to climb in, it means if you've got a bad back or you're a bit sore and you don't want to have to flex, it's so easy to jump into the back of this car. And also there is a lot of space, so you can stretch your legs out a bit. Look how much leg room I have. Good foot room, good knee room, and I've also got tons of headroom as well. This is a really comfortable place to be in the back. And okay, yes, the middle seat is a little bit on the narrow side, and you've got a bit of a tunnel through there as well. But as a four-seater, this is a really, really good car. And if you don't have anyone in the middle, you do also get this nice armrest, some cup holders there, and there's even a ski hatch. I mean, this is a Swedish car. Of course, there is a ski hatch through there as well. And the good things don't stop there, because when you open the boot of this XC40, as I said earlier, it's got a nice long boot up here, but when you fold down the rear seats, you'll spot that they go down flat, which means it does a fantastic job of impersonating a van. Look at that. Now, it's not all brilliant news, because when you lift up the floor, there is nowhere near as much room as you get in some of the other cars here. In fact, you've got a little bit of space here, but then there is some hardware under there, which means underfloor storage isn't amazing, but it is a functional and comfortable car. In fact, it feels really comfortable to drive and very relaxing too. Although, if you press this button here, this Volvo gets a bit excited. But if that Volvo wasn't posh enough for you, let me introduce you to a car that actually needs no introduction, because this is the Range Rover Evoque, which just so happens to be one of the most searched for cars on Cinch, and for very good reason. I mean, it looks fantastic, and also you've got a good selection of cars to choose from. You can go for the plug-in hybrid version, you can go for the diesel version, and you can also go for petrol versions. Plus, the interior is lovely. Oh, this cabin is so nice. This is a real step above everything here, including that very mature Volvo, because the fit and finish and also the impressiveness of the tech inside the latest Range Rover Evoque is a real strong point of this car. And also it just feels premium. The materials are nice and soft. You've got stitching up here as well, and you've got some shiny bits too. It is, of course, functional as well. We've got plenty of storage for big cup holders in there, and we've got room under here. If I can lift those up, loads of room down there, some charging ports as well, and your door bins are generous, plus the glove box is okay. But those are boring things. You're in an Evoque. What matters is how bloody cool the infotainment systems look. I mean, you've got a nice digital screen up here which can display your sat nav as well, but then you've got these cool ones here. This is your main infotainment screen with a lovely Jaguar Land Rover aesthetic. They're really proud of this, and I think it is one of the nicest looking ones out there, even if it's not the fastest reacting. And then you've also got your climate control down here. Now, normally I would moan about digital climate control, but there is enough just manual buttons and switches in it to make it usable, and the rest of it makes it look very cool. And you can also adjust your driving modes here as well, because of course this is a Land Rover, although not many Evoques go off-road, do they? Now, in contrast to the XC40, the Evoque, which gets these snazzy door handles, it doesn't have that big cutout there. Instead, you've got this diagonal area of glass, which means actually climbing into the back is nowhere near as easy, especially if you've got a bad back. Actually, I just hit my head there. That wasn't scripted. And actually in the back of the car here, it is a little bit more narrow as well. We haven't got as much leg room, actually considerably less leg room, although knee room is okay and headroom is okay as well. So long journeys in the back of this car aren't going to be the most fun for adults, but for kids, they'll be all right. Although, bearing in mind how much technology there is up front, there are no USB ports down here. All there is a 12-volt port, so you can buy an adapter, but that does feel like you've been shortchanged in such a high-tech car up front. And when you come to the boot, while we do have an electric tailgate here, which is quite nice, you have to admit that there isn't quite as much room as there are in some of the other cars. Now, the overall space up top is pretty good, actually. And look, I can demonstrate with our suitcase. It's quite large. It doesn't have any issues swallowing that. But if space up top is your priority, well, you're probably going to want to consider this car's sister model, which is the Discovery Sport. It gets most of the same interior bits, but it has a bigger boot. And we've compared those cars directly in the link that's on screen now. This actually is the plug-in hybrid model as well, which means you also compromise when it comes to underfloor storage. But handily, if like me, you don't like having any cables rolling around in the boot, at least they fit into this storage space here. But really, if you want more space and you want an Evoque, you should go for one without the hybrid tech, because then you get more underfloor storage. Just as much as that is form over function, this car is the complete opposite, because it's function over form. This is the Skoda Kamiq, and you can pick these up for half the price of the Evoque, although this particular one is barely more than 10 grand, and yet you still get a car that squeezes in as a small SUV, and that's because it's actually really practical. I mean, look at the size of this car's boot. It doesn't ride as high as other ones, and yet somehow the boot floor actually manages to go quite low. So much so, in fact, that there's a special surprise when you lift this up. There's a spare wheel. How very Skoda. But even if you just want to use the top of the boot here, well, it actually swallows our suitcase. No problems whatsoever. And dare I say it, this boot might actually be quite friendly for a dog. All right, okay, I'm going to admit that the interior obviously isn't the most premium of the lot we have here. By contrast to the Evoque, this is very basic. But if you actually look at the kit list you get on this car, it's all okay. I mean, you've got a couple of USB-Cs down there, and you even get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto in a pretty good infotainment system, I must say. And you even get a couple of dials here, which are old school analog dials, and so they work perfectly well. Storage space is good, and we've got cup holders, door bins, and even an okay glove box. But where you really notice this car's level below the other stuff is in the materials, because it's quite scratchy pretty much everywhere. But Skoda owners wouldn't call it scratchy. I think they would call it tough and functional and hardy. And you've obviously got manual switches and controls as well to make driving easy, even when you want to fumble with the aircon. Now, more contrast to the very plush Evoque comes with the back here, because it's actually a little bit wider, so it's easier to climb in. Although, as you might have noticed, this Kamiq does sit a little lower than some of the other cars here. It barely counts as an SUV, so you do have to go a little bit lower to get in. But because the space is good, and I mean really good, you don't mind too much. Look how much legroom I have. My feet can go right under the seat ahead, and I've got loads of knee room as well, and I'm not short on headroom either. So this, as a spacious back seat, is a very, very good car indeed. You don't get much in the way of creature comforts. You only get a couple of vents down there, but you don't get anything else. But I mean, it's a Skoda, it's sensible, and most importantly, it's really, really cheap. But in terms of usability, in terms of space, this is great. Oh yeah, and I should mention that you can get the Kamiq both in petrol form like the one we have here, and also you can get them in diesel as well if you want more fuel economy. Our next car is another that looks less like an SUV and more like a tall hatchback, because this is the BMW X1. And yes, we've chosen the previous generation car, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But that does mean it's like a 1 Series, only a lot more practical. So there's no confusing this with a jacked up hatchback when it comes to the boot space, and neither is there when it comes to back seat space, because honestly there is a really good amount of room in here. Not only is it actually quite easy to climb in, it is a lower car than other cars, so of course it's a bit lower, but once you're in, you've got a good amount of legroom, almost as much as you had in the Skoda, good amount of foot-room, and no shortage of headroom either. And the actual rear bench itself is nice and comfortable. We've got leather in this car as well, and you get a central armrest. Plus, if you need to store things through the middle, like your skis, you can fold these rear seats down individually as well. So it's actually functional and nice. Now here is where it starts to feel a little bit last generation, because unlike the latest BMWs, which have a big slab of infotainment screens, this one has 2 smaller ones. In fact, you actually get more analog dials here, but they've got a digital back to them, and then you've got a smaller screen here. But it does work really well, not least because you can control it either by a touchscreen or by a the iDrive down here, which is just so easy to use on the go. And in fact, that is true for the whole of this interior because you have buttons. So it means it's easy. These manual switches for climate control and even stuff on the steering wheel are just so easy to use on the move. And even though it doesn't have the shine and the gloss of some of the latest interiors, you've still got some nice materials here. I mean, look at the seats, they're nice and leather wrapped as well. Plus, you've still got plenty of functionality. You've got storage space down here, which reveals a couple of cup holders. You've got this area of storage in here, and then this armrest, actually, if I lift this up, has a little storage zone here, which I guess you could put your phone in. And also, by the way, you can connect your phone to the infotainment, so you can get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wirelessly onto there. Plus, well, your door bins are good, it looks cool, and it's a BMW. Look, you're driving along and you're staring at that special badge. And yet, you can pick up X1s on Cinch for under £15,000, making the X1 a proper BMW bargain. Talking of bargains, this is the Hyundai Kona, and it's a perfect example of a car that's great value, but also really, really nice. I mean, I think this is one of the nicest looking crossovers you can buy, and inside, it's easily one of the nicest to live with. I mean, compare this to the BMW or even the Range Rover, and yes, this slightly lower spec Kona isn't going to really impress you, but if you think of it as a good value car, and especially if you compare it to the Skoda, well, you're going to see that this interior actually is really, really nicely put together. The fit and finish is excellent, and actually the tech you get, while it isn't the most advanced, it's really good to use. I mean, they've thought everything through. Look how this screen is slightly matted so it's not as reflective. And also just how simple it is to use. We've got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and everything works nice and quickly. The instrument cluster as well is a really big screen. I mean, it's just a slab, a big rectangle, but it's clear, it's crisp, and it's lovely to look at. And you've also got some buttons where you want them to be in the zone for climate control. It makes it really easy to use, and as well we've got a couple of 12-volt ports to go with our USB-C port down there as well. So this is a well-kitted car, and look, you can store things, cups as well in your door, storage in here, and a nice sized glove box as well. It is just a nice place to be, this Hyundai, and that's true up front, and it's true in the back as well, because the rear space in the Kona is actually all right. It's definitely not the best here, and I mean, we're a bit more upright because this is a slightly more square shaped car, so my feet fit comfortably under there, but my legs are at slightly more of an angle. But I've got good amount of headroom here, and it's quite easy as well to climb in because the door is quite wide too. As a 4-seater, this is comfortable, and as a 5-seater, it is okay. Although in this lower grade Kona, we don't have tons of creature comforts. You're gonna have to go for a higher grade one to get things in the back. I mean, there's literally nothing there. Now, the Kona's boot is actually the most surprising bit, not because it's particularly massive. I mean, it is actually very spacious indeed, but amongst the cars here, it's good. It's good. Look at this. No issues whatsoever. But the most surprising thing is because this Kona comes in various forms, you can get it in petrol and you can also get it in hybrid form. You might imagine this hybrid car wouldn't have much space under here, but check this out. It actually has loads of space. This floor actually can go into 2 positions. And while we do have this polystyrene thing here with your tyre repair kit and stuff like that, you could take that out and have this full wheel well exposed under here, despite the fact this has loads of batteries in it. That's very impressive, and it's very sensible. But if you're looking for something that's sporty and premium, but yet still somehow flies under the radar, let me introduce you to the Audi Q3. This interior looks all right, doesn't it? And that's because we've gone back up market a little bit, because the cabin of Audis is really lovely these days. I mean, the screens and the tech they give you, it feels top notch, but you still get buttons and controls that are easy to use on the go. Look at these climate control switches. They're actually really lovely, and they look really good as well. Plus, the functionality is still there in this car. We've still got a decent cup holder pair here. We've got storage for your phone, USB-C ports, door bins, you name it, this car has it. But it feels that much more special because it's a sporty feeling Audi. And I must say, these seats with their S-line branding on the top, they look and feel great. Now in the back, it's an interesting affair because actually it's quite spacious. It's easy to get into the back because it's quite a wide opening, and you've got a good amount of knee room, not the most foot room, but it's plenty and all okay for most adults. And actually the rear benches are quite interesting because you've got 2 seats here which sit slightly further forward than the one in the middle, but it is just about usable as a 3-seater in the back. But interestingly, you don't get a few things you'd expect in an Audi. So we don't have any pockets here to put anything in, so that's an unusual thing. And we don't have also in this particular car any charge ports down there, but we do get a pair of vents so we can get our own temperature pointed directly at us, which is nice. And as well, by the way, you've also got an armrest in the middle with a couple of cup holders. Now, while a lot of people think of the Q3 as just a jacked up A3, when you open the boot, you'll discover it definitely is not, because look how long it is. And in fact, I can show you how long it is, because now you've seen how this suitcase fits in other cars. Look how much space it has when I go in that way. And of course, if I fit it that way, it's even better. Now, I have to confess, while it is pretty good up top here, and while you do get a flat floor as well, or near flat floor, when you lift up the floor of our car here, we have got some technology in the boot. We've got a subwoofer and some other bits around it, including an amp. So we're a little bit short on underfloor storage, but there is still some there. And you, of course, get these little pockets on the side. But overall, because this is an Audi, you're going to buy it because of the great sound system it has. So I think priorities are in order for this car. Which brings me neatly to our final car in the selection, another high-tech German, but one that goes about small SUV life in a very different way. I mean, look at this interior. It's more of a blend of classic and modern versus that very futuristic looking Audi. So it's going to be taste dependent. And I should also add that you can probably spot there are 2 small screens in this car, but you can get a much bigger slab of Mercedes infotainment across here if you go for a higher grade trim. But actually, you needn't do that if your main focus is on family duties, because you'll still get the same shiny bits here and these very theatrical vents, and you'll still get this nice fit and finish to the cabin. And of course, even though these screens aren't particularly massive, they're still Mercedes, which means they're easy to use. And where other cars, including the BMW, had a rotary dial, we now have this touch sensitive one down here, which is quite cool. And it means you can actually write your name and squiggle stuff on certain menus. Also, storage space is good in this car. Look, we've got loads of room down here, cup holders, you can throw your phone in there. If I press this, we expose a nice central gap in there. We've got a decent sized glove box, door bins, you name it. And also the seats in these cars are lovely. They're Mercedes, so they're supportive and they're just comfortable on a long drive. This is a really good car if you do big distances, and also I think it might be all right if you ride in the back. Oh, this is another car with a really good amount of foot and legroom. This is a spacious interior back here, and actually the materials feel very nice as well. Look, we've got leather even on the back, and my seat is nice and wide and comfortable. Plus, we've even got a USB-C port down there, albeit one to share between the passengers. But this is just a nice and spacious place to sit. Check this out. That's that much. It's quite spacious here. And also, as a middle seat, this is pretty wide. And that sort of makes up a little bit for the fact that you don't, and this is weird given the size of the car, you don't get a central armrest. So there's no way of folding down and resting my arm there, nor is there anywhere to put my cups in there. I have to put my cup in the door, but it's at an angle. So if you've got an open cup, it's going to spill everywhere. Now, this is a Mercedes, so you might have expected this to be powered, and well, you'd be right, because it actually is. But the boot itself, compared to the Audi, is actually quite noticeably shorter. And in fact, I can demonstrate that. Do you remember how easily it went into that Audi lengthways? Well, look at it here. It doesn't. That doesn't fit. So you'd have to put it in this way. That demonstrates that you have got a little bit less boot space overall. And this car, by the way, is the petrol, and you can also get a diesel, but if you get the plug-in hybrid, which a lot of people do, you'd lose your underfloor storage. But in this car, thankfully, we do have actually a decent amount here, although with all of these bits here, you might not want to throw in your wine gums because they'll get all mixed up. But as an overall boot space, it's not bad at all. But really, what's best about this car is at that end. And I should say, by the way, these are really comfortable and effortless to drive. Although there is one car we left off the list today, but it's one that will do all the things this lot can do and for a very good price. Plus, it's one that can also go properly off-road, and that is the Dacia Duster. And you're gonna have to see us get it mucky in this video here.